The Tau species was first encountered by the Imperium roughly 6,000 years ago. Adeptus Mechanicus archives date the moment of contact at the exact year 789 of the 35th millennium. Far from their modern incarnation, these Xenos were noted by the land's vision explorator vessel as to be little more than blue troglodytes, feasting on bones and wielding flint spears onto Owl's arid savannas. Earmarked for routine cleansing by follow-up expeditions of colonial seeding fleets, Tau might have served as an unremarkable frontier outpost of the Imperium, like innumerable others. To think that mankind could have strangled this virulent, blue-skinned alien race in its infancy only invites sighs of regret. All the ignominies they have heaped at the door of the Imperium would have been avoided. Alas, it was not to be so. Warp storms devastated all approaching Imperial vessels, their cargo holds were torn open, and every settler and soldier was emptied into the airless void. Warp activity continued to fluctuate violently for light years around Tau, forming an impenetrable barrier that colonial assessors rightly construed as an ill omen. What they did not see was the malefic sentience behind it, as I argue in my The persistence of the storms and their sudden, timely arrival speaks of an extended effort of warp tampering. Who, or whatever, was behind these storms succeeded in their plot. The Imperial colonial project failed. Its successors wrote off Tau as a forlorn hope. Thereafter, the warp storms continued to rage for centuries, acting as a shroud that concealed the evolutionary ascent of the foe. In retrospect, we can curse our predecessors for their naivety, but in truth, how could they have foreseen what has unravelled? How would they have known the dishonours and atrocities that would engulf their descendants at Kronos, Koloth Gorge, Agrellan, and Timbra? Thus, the watchful vigil of the Inquisition must never slacken. Every detail of every occurrence must be scrutinised with intense suspicion, lest there be a dozen other Xenos savages on the cusp of forging a spacefaring empire. Let them be dashed against the rocks of their barbarian dwellings, and let their broods be thrown from the highest crag. All colonial fleets must be supported and outfitted exhaustively for Xenos purgation missions. Any warp squall that assails them must be registered with inquisitorial authorities and preened for the slightest oddity. But I digress. For now, in this document of analysis, we concern ourselves with the foul Xenos that escaped righteous annihilation. Heed my warning, for though I am in the utter minority in my assessment of the Tau's degree of threat, I hope to convince loyal sons of the Imperium that the Tau do indeed demand a greater allocation of castigatory resources and attention. The Tau Empire itself is situated in the Ultima Segmentum, near the Eastern Fringe. Though insignificant in comparison to most of the Xenos empires the Imperium has battled over the millennia, it has consistently and rapidly expanded over the course of 3,000 years. It encompasses more than 300 light-years of territory, and its sigil marks the banners of approximately 100 settled worlds. Tau, their home planet, is said to reside at the Empire's absolute centre. From this seat, the Ethereals, a shadowy cabal of witch prophets, command both their own particular Xenos breed that dominates the Empire, and a host of others who serve them as mercenaries or are subjected to the Tau as client races. The Tau themselves are divided into 4 distinct subspecies. Each derives its own particular qualities thanks to accelerated evolution within Ta'au's different biomes and topographies. How these divergent Tau breeds became neatly sequestered into their own castes is obscure, though the Xenos maintain a hagiographical account of their ethereal overlords, who they credit for unifying them. Besides political coherency, the Ethereals also introduced the infamous Tau Va doctrine, or greater good, to their cousins, a quasi-religious belief that is supposed to have brought harmony and peace to the disparate tribes of Ta'au. Laughably saccharine, only an imbecile would believe the childlike propaganda of these Tau chronicles. The wheel of history is always greased by blood. Our beloved God Emperor could only bring unity to mankind through a cosmic, great crusade that ruthlessly broke the wills of a million deviant worlds. How could a handful of wizened, backward mystics on a primitive world unify a species without a blade unsheathed in anger? If it is as they say, that the Ethereals are unstained by bloodshed, then their words served as their uncanny weapons. For it is known by Imperial agents that the Ethereals are some breed of etheric conjurer, or perhaps manipulators of subtler biological phenomena such as Xenos pheromones. They carry in their presence a psychic weapon that surpasses any of the plasma technologies their lessers in the Earth Caste have so far devised. Though not as rudimental in assessment as a tyrannid hive mind, the Ethereals are indeed the heads of the Tau, and if decapitated, their sycophantic inferiors will be reduced to disarray, as well as demoralized by profound anguish, exerting tremendous influence, if not outright control, over the psyches of the Tau. It is said that if an Ethereal commanded a member of a lower caste to kill itself, it would obey without hesitation. Such is the power of their celestial control. Therefore, these blue-skinned prophets must always be the targets of any officio assassinorum operators at work in nearby systems. If a campaign is to be fought to reduce the expansion of their so-called spheres, presiding Ethereals must be eliminated at any cost. There is a caveat to this suggestion, however. In the event of the death of a particularly revered Ethereal, Tau forces are recorded to have sometimes become enraged and driven to new heights of stubbornness. Therefore, immediate strategic and tactical considerations must be evaluated before a target is neutralized. The inner workings and secrets of the Ethereals remain a mystery, and only with experience can the Imperium learn how to effectively counter their dire threats. They are the single most important and enigmatic element of Tau society, but beneath them are the 4 other castes, who we shall now assess. The Tau Empire's Fire Caste are its guardians and offensive fighting force. Taller, stronger, and more agile than the others, the Fire Caste derived from the warrior tribesmen who hunted game on the plains of Ta'au. As with all castes, they have been selectively bred within their own subspecies for an intended purpose. In their case, it is war. They are practitioners of all its arts, from combat sports to group tactical exercises. They train throughout their lives for this sole purpose. Slight in comparison to a human, they are not to be scoffed at entirely. A fire warrior's strength is his knack for positioning, intelligence, and coordination. Their helms possess significant interfaces of hollow targeters, advanced communications, and even adaptive strategic mapping, not to mention other more esoteric programs of Xenos Arcana. They are deadly at range, and their Xenos plasma rifles can atomize steel and flesh with ease. Veteran fire warriors encase their comparably weaker bodies in mobile frames of tank-grade armor that can soar through the sky and reach considerable speed on foot. These battlesuits ascend in tiers of size and willpower, and can prove to be immense pains to counter, pin down, and neutralize. The Fire Caste's war machines are similarly fearsome, such as those based on the versatile Devilfish design. Conducting land warfare with vexing proficiency, the Fire Caste are slippery but capable foes for the Imperium's own martial classes. The Earth Caste are the menial labourers, artisans, craftsmen, and even the inventors and scientists of the Tau race. They are by far the most numerous caste, accorded their place and rank by the innate talents an individual possesses. These workers construct the Tau's smooth surface buildings and bizarre Xenos temples, while the most gifted contribute to the Empire's reckless innovation in technology. They fabricate the infamous machinery that operates a large sector of the Tau economy, as well as engineer the weapons and vehicles of Tau armies. Members of the Water Caste are crucial in the functions of Tau society, both internally and externally. They, as their name suggests, flow between the Empire's constituent castes as intermediaries, dedicated to staffing the bureaucracy of this young Xenos empire. They serve as administrators, politicians, negotiators, and diplomats. Not only this, but many of the Water Caste are merchants and traders who accompany Tau colonists to new worlds. This subspecies of the Tau are expert sophists, manipulators, tricksters, and hucksters, and cannot be afforded the slightest degree of trust in diplomatic arrangements. Possessing a eugenically bred talent for lying and casuistry, they can tie up negotiations ranging from a market haggle to a wartime summit of negotiation. Much can be said on these hated enemies who wage war on the frontiers of mankind even in peace. It has been observed by Imperial analysts that Water Caste dignitaries in particular have an appreciation for the spoken word that has at times boggled our comprehension. They effortlessly absorb the nuances and characteristic charms of their enemies' ways of communication. Bluffs are immediately seen through, and attempts to thwart their insinuations in a detail of dispute are mysteriously reversed. Terms are often concluded with an immediate sense of regret after a Water Caste diplomat's glamour has worn off its bewitched victim. Investigations into this phenomenon by genitors of the Adeptus Mechanicus are ongoing, but it is believed their evolution has predisposed the Water Caste to an eminent skill in linguistics and psychological analysis. Finally, the Air Caste are the spindly Xenos breed who operate the Tau's interstellar fleet and voidcraft. In the barbarous origins of their race, they were once scouts whose membranous wings buoyed them across Ta'au's upland heights. With their ascent to the stars, their wings became useless and thus began to morph into ugly and sickly thin voidborn pilots. All Tau are ugly, of course, but this astral variant is perhaps the most unnerving, as all creatures born in the void tend to be. Thankfully, they are almost entirely unseen, being by far the most craven of the Tau castes. Uniquely cruel, they exert their resentments on the noble race of man by pelting the Imperium cities with orbital bombardments and disgorging swarms of their air caste kindred as fighter, bomber, and transport pilots who provide air support to ground invasion forces of the fire caste. Through the collective effort and unity of these 5 constituent Tau gene types, their empire continues to expand with startling alacrity. Guided by the Ethereals, the Tau wage war, integrate neighbouring species, and settle new worlds. In Tau history, these stages of the Empire's growth are named the Spheres of Expansion. After the Tau developed their own inferior means of void transit, as well as dreadfully limited warp drives, they left behind their obscure origins and spread their contagion across nearby systems. The first sphere of expansion lasted roughly a millennium and settled numerous worlds, establishing the Empire's 8-fold core of so-called septs, and inducted the first collaborationist regimes of outside Xenos races. The sole Xenos race the Tau encountered that could not be reasoned with, nor had the patience to listen to their bleating on the importance of the so-called greater good, were the Orcs, who answered, predictably, with a chain axe. Thus, the Tau were acquainted with a foe the Imperium has battled since its inception, and reportedly achieved dominance over in their recently won clutch of space. The second expansion broke new ground for Tau exploratory fleets, and it ushered in a swath of worlds formerly thought to be unreachable. Despite the joy of these victories, won both by violence and the coercion of diplomacy, there was one problem. They belonged to the God Emperor of mankind. After having crossed the Gulf of Damocles and annexing imperial territories, a response was long in the making. The colossal gears of the Imperium turn ponderously, but when the message of fresh betrayal by a score of Xenos collaborationist planetary governments arrived, alongside a slew of Tau invasions of imperial worlds, the High Lords of Terror could not allow such a slight to go unavenged. Nor could they tolerate a nascent Xenos empire impinging on the Imperium's rightful domain. Marshalling a crusade fleet centered around a dozen capital starships, with 5 attendant provisional companies drawn from multiple chapters of the Adeptus Astartes, alongside 19 regiments of the Imperial Guard, and even cohorts of the Titan Legions, they dispatched this grand retaliatory expedition first to the Timbra subsector during the year 742 in the 41st millennium. Needless to say, the Tau felt the merest touch of the Emperor's power in the ensuing collisions of the Damocles Crusade, and they reeled in terror. The full events of that campaign shall not be covered in depth here, but in the future I will provide a full account of its many glories, as well as its more questionable outcomes. There is a greater emergency at hand that needs immediate addressing. The time for crowing over old laurels is not now. After a period of licking their wounds and reassessment, it seems the Tau have returned, and despite the ostensible victory of the Damocles Crusade, they remain undeterred. Alarmingly undeterred. It is now that I address the cause for this work. As I speak to you, in the year 997 of the closing 41st millennium, the Tau filth are swooping down on the exposed and unprepared planetary garrisons across the northern sector just west of the Damocles Gulf. Whoever leads them, suspected to be a Tau warrioress of newfangled renown and skill, appears to be everywhere at once. The novel speed of the Tau offensive is shocking. In contrast to their sluggish voidcraft of previous expansions, the Earth Caste evidently has improved upon earlier designs. Armed flotillas are isolating loyal holdouts and cutting off the trickle of relief forces that have valiantly rallied to the Imperium's sacred defense. We are standing at a crossroads. The Imperium cannot abandon its far-flung kinsmen, nor can it endure the violation of its holy sovereignty and dominion. Thus, there is a demand for new scholarship as well as arms and warriors in the struggle against the Tau. To destroy this enemy, we must dig deep into their collective psyche, customs, tactics, strategy, and governance. Only through knowledge will the road to victory be bridged, for knowledge is power. To defeat the sophisticated race of the Tau is to develop a nuanced path, for they have proven their endurance in the face of brute force. Central to the Tau's empire is its greater good doctrine. Without comprehending it, we will never understand what drives their so-called spheres of expansion. It is the underpinning ethos that binds the Tau, from the lowliest menial to the loftiest ethereal. The greater good is a universal religio-philosophical dogma that insists on all sentient beings unifying to cooperate for a shared benefit. This is reflected in the caste system established by the Tau. Each caste performs a select set of services for the sake of the wider Tau society, and the individual caste member hones their sole dedication to an expert degree. This allows for each caste to become exceedingly specialized in their field, and they must sacrifice their individual desires, ambitions, and whims for the sake of the whole picture of the Tau Empire, its greater good. Further, this is extended to the whole of the cosmos. Every being must participate in a collective betterment and advancement towards this greater good. This good, of course, is nothing more than the domination of the Tau subspecies of the Ethereal caste, and in turn, their lesser cousins. The greater good, in theory, has no particularity, but this is a lie. The Ethereals preside as parasites, hunched over the necks of all the fools they have subjected to themselves. Their will and their desires are what is good, and if any slave disagrees in a significant way, they are ousted as reprobates and pariahs. While the greater good is presented as an open, tolerant world view, the scorched worlds of all those who have disagreed and refused the Ethereal's offer of golden chains testify to its sham nature. When it becomes clear a species they seek to integrate for the greater good does not willingly do so out of principle, they then seek to corrupt them by bribes. Though Tau propaganda exalts their philosophy as culturally superior and as a noble, cerebral, and even compassionate doctrine, it is clear that this is Xenos camouflage. It is perhaps the most effective Xenos camouflage ever contrived. As an ideological trap, it is no less insidious than demonic possession or the insemination of tyrannid gene stealers. Indeed, I put forward that the greater good could be a kind of psychic virus or subtle poisoning of a victim's subtler physiological elements. A malady that then grips the brain in lifelong delusion. Perhaps it is even parasitical. The innate conformity displayed by the broader Tau race indicates this dark possibility. Through proximity with their ethereal overlords, they have become docile, and to those who would seek to end their tyranny, intensely hostile. The greater good even seems to stir a kind of mania in those who have become infected. It compels them to push for the Tau Empire's expansion, and thus the Ethereals, lording over their underlings, happily oblige their programmed desire. For non-Tau races, the greater good spreads through contact with the Ethereals' water caste lackeys. Either through diplomacy or trade, this contagion is the deadliest weapon the Tau wield. Such is its power that they prefer to export it under the auspices of peace, rather than resort to an honourable contest of arms. Consummate liars, the Tau obscure their expansionist ambitions with rhetorical and ideological farce. They are too cowardly and weak to openly declare their desire for galactic hegemony, and so resort to cultivating guile and cynical moralistic pleas for negotiation. Numerous imperial worlds have been taken in by honeyed promises and sweet-smelling trade deals. Forbidden Xenos technology has subsequently flowed into the Imperium's eastern border, thanks to the machinations of Tau delegations. By way of plantation harvesting equipment, constructor engines, and other alien products, distant Imperial worlds have become enmeshed in Tau trade networks and forsake the lawful goods sold by loyal merchant consortiums of the Emperor. This treasonous heresy is worsened by the fact that, besides out of material interest, some frontier colonies have even defected or come under the Tau's influence by means of ideological subversion. Abandoning the light of the Emperor's wisdom in abhorring the alien, they adopt the so-called greater good heresy, and thereby earn for themselves a just sentence of execution. While the Tau seek to divide and conquer the Imperium's frontier, playing upon wayward separatist ambitions and incentivizing upheaval, perhaps I may advance a radical but logical countermeasure. Their empire is not a homogeneous block, and is composed most obviously by a division of caste, but also of constituent subject races the Tau graft on to their burgeoning domains. The Ethereals themselves stand atop this pyramid as tyrants for all to see, and they make no efforts to diffuse their power among their inferiors. If there was a way to exploit this natural division and break the mental domination of the Ethereals and the greater good, it is possible that the Tau and their barbarian clients could end up locked in internecine struggles for power and control. I understand the controversy of this proposal, so consider it lightly, if at all. It would be an ironic turn of events, is all I will say. Rumours do filter in from time to time of wayward elements among the Tau, but these are unconfirmed and potentially hollow. There is nothing more the Ethereals would fear than a popular mutiny. The abominable variance of race, species, and gene type within the Tau Empire is a fixture of investigation within the... So, let us move to assess this particularly repugnant dimension of Tau society. Despite the pretenses of the Tau Empire and its greater good as an integrative, equitable commonwealth, the founding Tau race remain first among equals, as they euphemistically say. In reality, the vassal species of the Tau are nothing more than exactly that, slaves. Too weak to stand alone, the ethereal caste first, through obscure manipulations, make servants of their cousin castes. Then they extend their yoke to outsiders and compel them to observe the pieties of their absurd dogma. The Phryxians, Nicassar, Brachyura, Amphrazots, and Kroot are but a few of these alien toadies. It is suspected that the crowned monarchs of the winged Xenos insectoids named the Vespids are even under direct possession by the Ethereals, for they bow utterly to their whims and follow their direction without pause. No few Imperial citizens have felt the weight of this Xenos tyranny on their necks. At Cronus, it is rumoured that a few brave sons and daughters of the Emperor have put up armed resistance against Tau occupation. The Inquisition would be wise to embed operatives in both these and similar loyalist communities and help incense counter-uprisings. Ideally, they should be timed for the arrival of relief forces in system, but if they could distract and divert Tau resources from other hotspots of Imperial resistance, this too would be useful. Regardless, not all of mankind's subjugated colonial populations are as eager to fight the Blueskins. Some have fully digested the lethal propaganda of Tau water caste operatives and can only be punished with the utmost severity. Some, if it can be believed, even take up arms to fight for their new masters and even become proselytes of the greater good. In regard to why these Gwevesa, as they are called by the Tau, choose to betray the Imperium, I have embedded in your a data packet that contains a Vox sample of an interrogation and confession of one such traitor. It was taken not too long ago, near the outset of the now ongoing war of the Tau's latest expansion. I warn you, the colleague who gave me this is unorthodox in his techniques and demeanour. By the end of the recording, I'm sure you will be satisfied by his results, however. I shall leave it to your discretion when to listen. For now, let us move forward on how to deal with Gwevesa traitors. Suitable punitive measures for captured Gwevesa should naturally include summary execution. Excruciation methods like those applied in the recording are likewise optimal for exhausting resistance to interrogation. Assessments should be made whether a Tau collaborator is ideologically motivated and possessed, or simply a mercenary or opportunist. In both cases, they should be readily disposed of once all harvestable information has been extracted. The Tau's watercast spy networks regularly deploy true-believing traitors, such as the case example, and the complexity of their subterfuge mirrors other Xenos infiltration operations, like those of the aforementioned gene-stealer Tyranids. They exploit political wedge issues and foster discontent with corrupt planetary governments. Thus, the Imperium should attempt to rein in and enforce tighter anti-corruption standards on frontier worlds where Tau incursions are rife. Besides these covert methods of how the Tau continue to plague Imperial rule, we shall now proceed onto the overtly militant dimension of Tau expansionism. The Tau wage war in terms almost entirely reminiscent of their primordial origins, as tribal huntsmen. They detest the rigours of trench fighting and the grand scale of mass combat, instead adopting an entirely mobile and fluid approach to warfare. They place little strategic value in holding territory, instead measuring success by the defeat of opposing formations. Only when forced by the direst circumstances will a Tau force resort to holding ground, usually aided by an Earth caste attaché that constructs static defences for the Fire Warriors. Naturally, a siege is the worst nightmare for the Tau military machine, and their cities are only fortified as a last gambit. Assaulting an enemy city is an even worse prospect, as they are forced to heavily rely on auxiliary beasts, such as the hardy close-quarters fighters of the Kroot, to form their storm detachments. While admirable in certain respects, this extreme dependence on mobile strike tactics exposes the innate cowardice of the Tau species and the fragile inferiority that is inherent in the physiognomy of their fire warriors. They cannot stand up to a fair fight in hand-to-hand combat, and if a guardsman closes with his bayonet, the blue-skin warrior is finished. Craven as ever, the blueskins will sometimes hide behind their auxiliaries, soldiers that they have mostly conscripted from the Empire's stronger slave races. They use them as bait and as a lure to draw out the enemy. After their target is entrapped, the Tau counterattack at range in enviably agile but nevertheless inferior armoured exoskeletons they call battle suits. In devising plans of attack for these hunter cadres, the Tau remain cautious and flighty. They only invest in an assault if they possess overwhelming firepower and are assured of an efficient and quick kill. In their perverse code of honour, they have no compunction against cancelling such plans last minute or retreating from a superior enemy. The defence of cities see Tau hunter cadres applying the same tactics, but within the context of ambushes readied in kill zones in the crook of narrow streets, or sprung from choice rooftop positions. This approach is little different than how the hunter cadres would deal with an enemy traversing through a ravine or a mountain pass, and they do not choose to hunker down. Besieging a foe, fire warriors will prefer to encircle and isolate them. Meanwhile, they seek to use the siege itself as a lure for relief forces, waylaying them at crucial approaches. When reluctantly forced to storm a city, the fire warriors largely play a supporting role in the assaults of robust Xenos auxiliaries. As usual, they hide behind their larger, stronger forms, firing opportunistically at exposed defenders in salvos of plasmic fire. Tau fire warriors also regularly deploy the use of abominable machine intelligences in the guise of defensive and offensive drone technology. Analysis done by tech adepts on captured specimens seems to indicate that these machines, when alone, mostly depend on sentient guidance. When grouped together in a squadron, they can operate independently for a significant period. Though small, they are deadly, and are equipped with miniature but nasty variants of Tau armaments. With the Tau Empire's expansion, the Fire Caste and its niche fixation on maneuverability and small unit tactics has collided with the reality of grand-scale attritional warfare, as well as decisive set-piece battles. Consequently, the Blueskins continue to increase their demand for slave subjects to line their ranks. For who else is to absorb the munitions of the Imperial Guard, or be torn apart by the chain blades and power claws of the godlike Adeptus Astartes? While criticism can be levelled at the Imperium's liberality in the use of its manpower, mankind can never be accused of dependence on outside Xenos races to do the fighting for us. Both Astartes and mortal soldiers of the Emperor will happily die atop the stacked bodies of their fallen brothers, defiant to Xenos tyrant and heretic alike. The feeble blue-skinned race of the Tau finds this thought terrifying, and there is no greater fear that sets their heart to flight than the en masse bayonet and Lehman Russ shock assault of a roaring, Imperial Guard regiments. In Void Warfare, the air caste that operates the Tau's fleet, called the Korvattra in their vile tongue, are even more evasive than their land-fighting fire warrior counterparts. They extend the fire caste's hunting tactics to their methods of ship engagements. Therefore, they prize precision and long-ranged firepower, usually deployed in hit-and-run exchanges. Against the redoubtable Imperial Navy, they are opportunistic, preferring to fight only when they possess significant numerical superiority. The air caste vessels are equipped with gravitic shields, gravitic drives, and diabolical machine intelligences that enhance inter-ship coordination and accuracy. But Tau ships have little armour and are vulnerable when closed with in boarding actions or during the roll of broadside salvos. The Tau, knowing their fleet's vulnerability to the overwhelming force of Imperial vessels, prefer to dictate engagement turns and avoid set battles, instead preferring ambushes. They avoid close quarters engagements at all costs. The Tau prefer to pelt attackers with shoals of fighters and bombers launched from their numerous carrier ships. Strategically, they prioritize supporting planetary invasions, ferrying the ground troops of the Fire Caste and other auxiliary forces. Securing supply lines and logistical routes is also a key concern. Attrition, as with all Tau forces, is scrupulously avoided. Concerning the Tau fleet's development of its long-distance operational capacity, it has gradationally improved over time. Originally using a drive system that projected a sheaf of gravitic energy ahead of and around the vessel, which was continually reprojected further ahead, Tau vessels were extremely limited in their scope of travel. This barrier to Tau colonial expansion and naval development was overcome through mysterious circumstances at some point. It seems the Tau chanced upon a deficient form of warp drive technology and managed to replicate it for their own use. As a race, the Tau appear to possess no psykers, an ominous and strange deficiency, but one that helps to hold back their expansion, at least by a factor of 5. Lacking psykers, they have no navigators to guide their ships through the warp, and instead skirt the periphery opened between real and warp space. This method, though slower, has its upsides. Tau explorator and invasion fleets can consistently traverse outward from their home star, and thus were able to initiate the first spheres of expansion. Their technique is also not prone to the disasters of warp travel, such as demonic assailments or warp squalls. Tau naval technology doesn't show any sign of stagnation, as we are coming to realise to our chagrin at this very moment. The Imperium should not underestimate the ingenuity of Earth Caste engineering and innovation in the field of voidcraft, as the Ethereals are especially eager to expand and improve upon their empire's existing models. As time unveils what the Tau have been up to in the centuries since their bloodying during the Damocles Crusade, it will not be surprising, according to my estimations, if they have developed new, survivable heavy prototypes, as they no doubt have realised their flotillas cannot stand against the might of the Imperial Navy's battleships. This they learned to their horror, as they felt the terrible force of vessels such as the Leviathan Retribution-class battleship in combat. Raking the aliens' dainty cruisers at Hydras with overwhelming broadsides and Nova cannon strikes, the Blueskins soon came to fear the might of the Imperial Navy. When combined on campaigns of conquest, colonization, and expansion in a so-called coalition, directed and handled by their ethereal masters, the Tau fire, water, earth, and air castes, and their auxiliaries, despite their utter cowardice, remain a force to be reckoned with. Essential to their empire's rising star is their flirtation with damnable technologies. They have come a long way from the primitivism of their origins, but as I will argue, this advancement may yet prove to be costly in a manner beyond their arrogant calculations. Youthful, the Tau's vitality is observed in the rapid development of their technology and economy, most of which is fully and repulsively automated. As ever with the blueskins, the threat implicit in this fact is insidious, but not entirely obvious. I am sure some of you, as high-ranking and are pensively familiar with mankind's ancient legends of epochs before the Imperium. I trust your clearances have burdened you with such dark knowledge, and you have perused the tales that the few who are aware regard as fairy tales and mere myth. I promise you, as a scholar of mankind's antiquity, these stories are no empty figments of imagination. If familiarized, the Age of Iron that is said to have preceded Old Night must strike your memories like a premonition of what is to possibly come for our Tau enemies. Under this nightmarish realization, one that conjures up ancestral terror of cataclysmic wars with machine minds and the obliteration of countless human colonies throughout the galaxy by the technological monstrosities our forebears unleashed, I urge you to consider the consequences of an unchecked Tau expansion. While their scale of production as it stands is utterly tiny in comparison to the Imperium's, let alone any serious interstellar empire that has existed, the pressure to grow their dominion could only exacerbate the malignancy of their Xenos tech, with unforeseen consequences. With a perpetually accelerating heretical intelligence in their midst, who knows what crisis might envelop them and then us. The threat of the Tau may not be as immediate nor grand as the encroaching Tyranid hive fleets, nor as shattering as Orc incursions, but its severity is deceptively subtle. As we have witnessed in the beginning, when tech priests of the Adeptus Mechanicus made first contact with the Tau, and colonial purgation forces were destroyed by warp storms, imperial laxity facilitated their empire's birth. The stealthy cowardice of the Tau nevertheless conceals great danger, as experienced by our guardsmen who fought them during the Damocles Crusade, whose torsos were blown apart after having been identified by the barely visible marker beams of a Tau Hunter Cadre's Pathfinder team. Known as the Valkyrie's Mark, survivors soon learned to not underestimate the cunningness of their blue-skinned foe. Thus, I say to you now, heed my warning. The Tau are on the march. They are encroaching upon countless frontier worlds, shadowed by the sacred stone visages of the Emperor, his Primarchs, and claimed by his great Aquila. They induce treason after treason, playing upon the caprice and insurrectionary sentiments of no few corrupt planetary governors. Above all, they intend to swallow vast tracts of imperial space and convert it to the zeal of their false and diabolical Xenos creed of the greater good. The fleets of their coalitions infringe constantly on the conditions of truce and limits, their hosts spilling forth and converting innumerable other Xenos breeds to their crusade against mankind. If we do not combat this alien threat now, it will fester beyond foreseeable proportions, as history has already shown. Damocles was barely more than a single momentary shiver of but one of the Imperium of mankind's infinitely powerful talents. If a truly momentous crusade was gathered, combining a wide array of Astartes, mortal and Mechanicus forces, and they were unleashed upon the Tau's fledgling empire in a great tidal wave, this Xenos blight would be swept away by the next Terran sunrise. We must avenge the humiliation that is wreaking havoc across the eastern frontier as we speak. The bloody conspiracy of the Tau cannot be ignored any longer. The Imperium must respond.